After 39 years of marriage, my world was shattered last month when I discovered that my wife had been unfaithful for the past 6 years. She had been engaging in multiple affairs, most notably with a young immigrant she met during her many trips to France. I'm 63 years old and she's 61. Both of us were born and raised in the south of France, though we've been living in California for years now. I trusted her completely and never once doubted her loyalty. Our marriage had always seemed so perfect, filled with laughter, love, and mutual admiration. Everything came crashing down when I stumbled upon a stash of videos they had made together. Today, I have an appointment with a lawyer. To give you some context, we met in 1977 when I was 21 years old. It was at a summer camp in Northern California, where she had come with her family. I had been living with my uncle nearby for over 2 years. We met on the beach while I was hanging out with my French-speaking friends, and she was there with her family. We started talking, and it turned out we were from the same small town between Nice and Cannes. I quickly became her summer boyfriend, and we stayed in touch when she returned to France a few months later. She came back to visit, and I eventually traveled to France to see her. Our first intimate moment was on a beach in Corsica in 1978. We got married in 1981 and moved to Los Angeles in 1984. A few years later, our son, now 29, was born, and we settled in Southern California in 1997. Before the pandemic, she ran a travel agency, which allowed us to see the world. We traveled even more after I retired, often flying first class for free. I thought this was our life forever. She must have made the LA to Venice round trip about 200 times, always with plausible reasons. Occasionally I joined her. She never seemed away for too long. Now, she's trying to save her business, which was devastated by the pandemic. She loves Venice and the French lifestyle, never really letting them go. She worked for several airlines before starting her travel agency 25 years ago. We had periods where intimacy was lacking, but typically, we were active 3 to 4 times a week. However, my recovery from prostate and bladder cancer slowed things down, and my drive isn't what it used to be. In her 40s, she gained some weight, but about 8 years ago, she decided to get fit. She took up running, hiking, yoga, and gymnastics, adopting a strict diet. By her mid-50s, she looked fantastic and was in great shape. I used to hike with her, but due to my bad knees, I can't join her anymore. By hiking, I mean serious backpacking across the Sierra Nevada, not just a stroll in Malibu Canyon. She has incredible energy and can outperform anyone in her field, winning several awards. Last year, she came back from France on December 27th after spending Christmas there. She told me in advance, since I was picking her up from the airport. This time, her smile was different, radiant. Although I had picked her up countless times, this felt special. We hadn't seen each other for 2 months, so I assumed it was because of that. I was happy to see her. I had prepared a romantic dinner for us that night. During dinner, she talked about all the new places she visited in France, some of which we had planned to see together. She mentioned skiing in La Vanoise, Little Venice, Château de Vaugreneuil, and Saint-Paul-de-Vence, places on our bucket list. I felt a pang of disappointment that she went without me. It seemed like she was almost bragging. She noticed my disappointment but didn't ask how I felt. Naturally, she might wonder if I asked her who she traveled with to these romantic spots, but the way she casually mentioned her lover made my concerns seem baseless at the time. I still had no reason to distrust her. Yet over the years, I sensed something was wrong, though I couldn't identify it. I thought it was related to her mother's illness. Her explanations often lacked detail, even when there was no need for secrecy. After dinner, she suddenly told me she was flying to Martinique for New Year's to visit friends she met last summer. I expressed my displeasure and asked why she couldn't spend New Year's with her husband instead of her girlfriends. She gave various excuses, saying they already had plans. I reminded her that as a married woman, she shouldn't make plans without her husband. I felt it was selfish, especially since I'd be alone on New Year's. She got defensive, calling me the selfish one. She said she'd given me over 39 years of her life and spent most New Year's Eves with me. She asked why it was wrong for her to need some time for herself. I explained it wasn't about her needing time for herself, but about not informing me in advance, given she'd been away for 2 months already. She could have spent New Year's with me, or at least let me know so I could make other plans. She refused to listen and walked away. In our relationship, we rarely argued, and when we did, we usually resolved it the next day without assigning blame. The same happened this time. The next day, we had breakfast together and talked as if nothing had happened. However, I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was someone else. What troubled me most was her rejection of intimacy that night after more than 2 months apart. She claimed to have a medical issue down there and had scheduled a doctor's appointment. This revelation was a new and jarring development for me. Normally, I might have just brushed it off, but something about her story this time felt different. So, I decided to look into her recent trip, the one she claimed to have taken with her sister and friends. Her sister and I had always had a good rapport, and she was quite the talker, so I called her up. In our conversation, I casually mentioned my wife's skiing trip to La Vanoise. Her sister's confusion was immediate and telling. She corrected me, saying there had been no such trip. When she asked where I got that information, I pretended it must have come up in an old conversation, making the call awkward but insightful. I didn't hint at any suspicions of infidelity, but the call left me feeling devastated. I knew confronting my wife would lead to her denying everything and possibly turning the argument around on me since I lacked solid proof. She was set to fly to Martinique for New Year's Eve, likely to be with her lover. My anger was mixed with deep insecurity and fear of losing her. I had given my all to this marriage, and now in my retirement, when I had envisioned us traveling and enjoying life together, she was betraying me. What worried me most was that I had battled and survived 2 types of cancer with her by my side. Now, if the diseases returned, who would be there for me? We used to share everything, but now she was hiding secrets, lying, and living a seemingly carefree life while I felt my world crumbling. The cancers I faced had high chances of coming back, so I was living on borrowed time. Though I had outlived the men in my family, with my father passing at 62, my brother at 60, and my grandfather at 57, turning 64 next month felt like a gift. Yet, facing the end alone was a terrifying thought. The woman I loved seemed to have vanished. Seeking help from forums, I realized that conventional methods of catching a cheating spouse wouldn't work for my situation, given the international nature of her affair. Hiring a private investigator or installing a voice recorder seemed impractical. The night before her trip to Martinique, I overheard her on the phone while she was in the bathroom, thinking I was asleep. Her simplified language suggested she was speaking to a non-native French speaker. I heard her express love and eagerness to be with him, confirming my worst fears. The next morning, she prepared breakfast and I drove her to the airport. After dropping her off, I rushed home, determined to access her email and uncover the truth. I knew her old email address and hoped she hadn't changed the password. I also planned to check our shared account for suspicious expenditures. Back home, I successfully logged into her email. Scanning through, I found plane tickets for her and a man named Akraf, who I suspected might be Algerian. It seemed she had been financing their meetings for over 2 years using our money. I dug deeper, hoping to find incriminating photos, but her email held none. My wife always took many photos during her travels, so I knew she must have stored them somewhere. She used to carry a portable hard drive, but later switched to a cloud system. Remembering I had set up her Dropbox account, which automatically uploaded her photos and videos when she was in a Wi-Fi zone, I searched for the Dropbox link in her email. Luckily, I found it and logged in using her email and password. What I discovered was heart-wrenching. Countless photos and videos of her with her lover. It was like seeing a timeline of her life over the past 5 years, filled with places she visited and people she met, none of which I knew about. A thumbnail of a video caught my eye. It showed her unclothed. Watching it, I saw her being intimate with a much younger Algerian man. Her laughter and the affection she showed him mirrored how she used to be with me. The way she looked at the camera as he recorded her was the same way she used to look at me. My heart shattered, and I stepped outside for air, tears streaming down my face. Returning inside, I watched more videos, each one more painful than the last. He was assertive, and she seemed to enjoy it. I realized I didn't know my wife at all. The videos spanned over a year, some as recent as her last trip. I was shocked to learn she enjoyed making intimate videos, watching adult films, and visiting adult stores. About 8 years ago, she started working out and became confident, taking an interest in recording our intimate moments. Initially, I joined in, but stopped when I realized it was more for her pleasure. I assumed her interest had faded, Little did I know she had found someone else to share it with. As devastating as all this was, there was more to uncover. I spent the entire day sifting through her Dropbox, uncovering photo after photo, video after video, each one more heartbreaking than the last. One picture showed her in an intimate moment with her ex-boyfriend, the first guy she'd been with before meeting me. Now a psychiatrist with grandkids, he hailed from the same area as us. They had always met up when she visited her mother, and she always referred to him as a friend. Little did I know, they had maintained a close relationship all along. It felt like our entire relationship had been a lie, that perhaps throughout all her trips to France, she had been seeing him. This man was still married and a respected doctor in his community. My wife had kept a meticulous record of their affair, almost as if she wanted me to find out. I didn't come across any videos of them together, just intimate pictures and records of their trips. It was clear she had been leading a double, maybe even a triple life, traveling between her two lovers. For the past 2 years, it seemed she had been exclusively involved with the Algerian immigrant. That entire day, memories of our life together flashed before my eyes. I had always trusted her completely and never questioned her faithfulness. Our marriage had been wonderful, filled with love, laughter, and mutual admiration. I had battled one cancer in 2008 and another in 2013, with her providing unwavering support both times. Despite the surgeries, we resumed our intimate life just 3 weeks after the operations. She had been the perfect spouse until about 2 years ago, when I noticed we were spending less time together. She started taking frequent trips to visit her ailing mother and found various excuses to travel abroad. On that day, I realized my life was about to change drastically. Just as I retired and started planning to travel the world with her, she began an affair. What hurt the most was knowing that while I was uncovering all this evidence, she was on her way to meet her lover. That night I barely slept, unable to keep this to myself any longer. Part of me considered moving on, perhaps relocating to South America or Asia to find a younger woman to spend my remaining years with. After all, my wife had clearly moved on. The next day, my wife called to check on me. Seeing her name on the caller ID, I wanted to confront her, but I knew this conversation needed to happen in person. I needed to see her face as she tried to lie to me. She had only 3 days left on her trip. The day before she returned, I spoke to her on the phone, not mentioning the affair but giving unusual responses that made her suspect something was wrong. I also reached out to a lawyer to explore my options. When she returned from her trip, I didn't pick her up as usual. I told her I was busy and suggested she take a cab, which struck her as odd since her flight was in the morning, and I was never occupied at that time. When she got home, I confronted her with all the evidence I had gathered. I showed her the videos of her intimate moments with the young Algerian man and the pictures of her with her ex-boyfriend. The evidence was so overwhelming that she couldn't deny it. To my surprise, she seemed unfazed, almost as if she didn't see anything wrong with her actions. She believed we could move past this, claiming she didn't want to rush into any decisions but also refusing to end her involvement with the Algerian man. She mentioned the affair with the doctor was on and off, and they hadn't seen each other in a while, without officially ending it. I questioned how she could maintain these affairs for so long, and she excused herself by suggesting she thought I was having an affair too, which she knew wasn't true. She even suggested I could have an affair if I wanted, but still wanted to remain married. I told her divorce was now inevitable. She insisted she didn't want a divorce and mentioned not wanting to return to her life in Southern California. Initially, I didn't fully grasp her meaning, but when she reiterated this sentiment on the 25th of the month, I realized she meant she didn't want to live with me. In a fit of rage, I threw all her clothes from our bedroom balcony onto the parking lot. Her reaction was one of surprise and shock, finally understanding I was serious about the divorce. She moved into our son's condo next door, which happened last Monday. Since then, we have had further discussions and agreed that divorce was inevitable. We consulted an attorney mediator on Thursday and began the paperwork. I contemplated reporting her affair with the doctor to the medical board, believing that as a psychiatrist, he had a moral responsibility to act ethically. He knowingly engaged in an affair with a married woman, causing pain and suffering. Half a century ago, he was part of my brother's social circle, though he didn't remember me. He is about 67 now, willingly using his professional skills of persuasion and manipulation to seduce my wife. I believe her actions were highly unethical. Update. I've uncovered that her relationship with her ex-boyfriend began around 2015. The three of us come from a small town, located between Nice and Cannes. She consistently claimed she was taking care of her elderly mother because her sister wasn't doing enough. Her ex-boyfriend was her first love. In March 2015, her sister ran into him at a pharmacy and informed him that my wife was in town. He gave his number to her sister, who then passed it on to my wife. That marked their first contact in 37 years. They started talking, went out for dinner, and rekindled their relationship. The south of France is beautiful, but I prefer Southern California. We've been living here since 1997, in a lovely house with an ocean view where I can enjoy year-round golf at a reasonable cost, which isn't possible in France. After I asked her to leave, she's now living with our son. She hasn't shown any intention of returning to live with me or apologized for the pain she caused. I believe she sees herself as a character like Sabrina, or Meryl Streep's role in The Bridges of Madison County, acting on her impulses for one last hurrah. We consulted a lawyer mediator yesterday, and it was a disheartening experience. Financially, she wouldn't face any problems living in France, as she owns a debt-free condo there. I couldn't extract much of a confession from her since I had already pieced most of it together with the Dropbox photos, plane tickets, and credit card statements. She refuses to divulge how she met the young Algerian immigrant. Based on the evidence, it seems they had a sugar mommy, sugar baby relationship. She believes he loves her, but it's clear he's using her for physical intimacy and as an ATM, not just spending her money, but mine as well. She mentioned they met around October 23, 2019, and their affair heated up in late October, evident from the Dropbox uploads. Certain events from the past few months now seem suspect. I recall her New Year's Eve trip to Martinique, but prior to that, while in Ireland with a friend who had mobility issues, my wife ventured far ahead on the Giant's Causeway Trail, easily visible in her red jacket, hundreds of meters ahead. At the time, I assumed she loved hiking and couldn't wait for us. Now, I suspect she used that time alone to secretly use her phone undisturbed. A similar situation occurred 3 days later on Strand Hill Beach. In early January, she told me she planned to stay in France from October to December 20th, claiming her sister insisted. This unusually long stay made me doubt her sister's role in the decision. She might have orchestrated it herself, hiding behind her sister's request. When the pandemic hit, she had a convenient excuse not to return, and I didn't see her until May. She used her mother's health as a cover while engaging in a whirlwind romance with the young immigrant, using various excuses to extend her stay. I asked her if she was intimate with both the doctor and the immigrant simultaneously. She admitted she was mainly intimate with the immigrant since they met. She hasn't explicitly expressed love for him, but mentioned that he is very interesting, which feels hardly different at this point. She gave me the classic line, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." Despite having an affair since 2015, she claims she doesn't want a divorce and says I'm free to have an affair if I wish. For years, she treated our marriage as an accessory, much like one of her handbags. I can't recall any significant issues in our marriage, even when our intimacy waned. I attributed it to my cancer. We rarely argued and never resorted to name-calling. I was completely unaware of any problems. Update: yesterday, I discussed our assets with the attorney. Because her condo was a gift from her mother, I have no legal claim to it. Likewise, she has no rights to the inheritance money I put in our living trust when my mother passed away in 2016. However, she is entitled to 50% of my pension from the city. Her business, which thrived before the pandemic but suffered greatly afterward, might entitle me to 50% of her share, though currently that's close to nothing. A recent development came to light last night. She received a call from the caretaker for her mother, informing her that her sister's husband, and her mother had all tested positive for COVID-19. I'm uncertain how this will affect our divorce proceedings. Regarding my pension, it's a Los Angeles City pension, and the 50% allocation is determined by the Brown Act. The formula for dividing it in case of divorce is set, and given my situation of being married before my career started and retiring while married, she's entitled to 50% with no room for negotiation. Currently, her business holds no value, but she intends to continue working, eventually selling her share to her business partner. I'm contemplating hiring a private attorney. She repeatedly expressed her desire to avoid returning to her previous life, content with living in France. This likely translates to enjoying multiple extramarital relationships while technically married. She initially considered continuing our life here while secretly involved with the younger man and her ex-boyfriend, but I made it clear that this wasn't acceptable. I contacted the pension department, and they confirmed her 50% entitlement. Finally, there was yet another deception. She had claimed that after meeting with her business partner, they had secured enough funds to sustain the business without pay for 6 months, as they had done during the crises in 2001 and 2008. She mentioned working hard to revive the agency and, if the economy recovered next year, selling her share to her partner and splitting the proceeds with me. When I asked if her partner was on board with this plan, she confidently assured me he was. But this morning, while cycling, doubt began to gnaw at me. Given her history of dishonesty, I decided to contact her business partner directly. He promptly informed me they had never discussed a buyout, and at 73, he had no interest in purchasing her 50%. She mentioned her IRAs, which are worth about $130,000, and she intended to give me half, $65,000, to balance things out. This seemed fair since both accounts consisted of the same mutual funds. However, the house presented a more complex issue. Held in a trust that we co-own, we need to reach an agreement if either of us wants to sell it. She brought this up, and I had no immediate response. Maybe the lawyer can provide some guidance, as this situation is likely common. She won't be filing any tax documents in France. In fact, her last paycheck was in July here in the U.S. We will file our taxes jointly for 2020. I have no plans to return to France. I texted the attorney with a question about my pension, but haven't heard back yet. Most other matters have been settled and can be split evenly without much fuss. She's leaving today and won't return until March. We'll schedule more meetings with the attorney during this time. Meanwhile, I've started on the paperwork. Our 29-year-old son lives nearby. He doesn't judge his mother and isn't very communicative. Communication has always been challenging between us. He offered to listen and assured me of his support, though I can't really tell what he's thinking. I didn't ask him to choose sides, but he noticed the situation when I removed her belongings from the house. I won't take any action against her Dr. X or the younger man. I was furious, and still am, believing the doctor lacked ethics and morals as a mental health professional. However, I understand that legally, I have no grounds to pursue this, so I need to let it go. The value of her company will only be determined by what they can salvage in the spring. If she doesn't stay, her business partner might be the only one interested in buying her shares. She is the driving force and main asset of the company. There are no other significant assets aside from the knowledge and dedication of the employees. She outperforms the next salesperson by several $1 million. Her business partner indicated last week that he's not keen on buying her out. If I can finalize a deal where everything is divided evenly, including 30% of my pension, I'll accept it. Update. She returned to France because her 89-year-old mother tested positive for COVID-19 and isn't doing well. Her mother is currently at home. My estranged wife texted me acknowledging that she won't claim more than 30% of my pension. We plan to initiate the divorce paperwork with the attorney mediator when she returns on March 16th. No more pick-me dance. During our drive to LAX, I asked her about her thoughts on not wanting a divorce. She sensed something was off due to my unusual responses. I agree not to cause any trouble until she commits to the 30% pension limit. The business is now down to only 4 or 5 employees. The others, including our son, were laid off. They're not conducting any business at the moment. Last year, they grossed over $7 million, and in 2018, it was around $6 million. She received substantial bonuses in the form of 401(k) plans, which she rolled over into her IRA. That's why her IRA is larger than mine. However, she hasn't yet realized that we'll be making them equal. The attorney agreed, so effectively, I'll receive $65,000 from her work. I'm entitled to 25%, which is half of her share, but I'm not holding any unrealistic expectations. If her business partner doesn't buy her out, and he said last week he has no intention to do so, my 25% won't be worth anything. We've agreed she won't claim more than 30% of my pension. We also reached an agreement to equally divide our other assets, including the house. However, I'd like to include a clause that if she remarries the younger man or her ex, she forfeits the 30%. I just don't want to cover her future husband's expenses. That seems fair to me. She doesn't directly say she will never remarry. She responds with statements like, the idea of remarrying is laughable, and there's no need for a remarriage, and so on. Update. After consulting with my employer's pension department, I've learned that the percentage of the pension she'll receive will remain her property indefinitely. So even if she marries any of her affair partners, she'll still retain her percentage, and I'll be partially contributing to their lifestyle. It doesn't matter that her ex-boyfriend is a neuropsychiatrist who likely earns 10 times more than my pension, or that her younger companion relies on her financially. I don't understand why I should hesitate if an attorney advises me to agree to her having less than 50%. I can't lose more than 50% anyway, so why not have her agree to 30%? If she changes her mind later on, I won't have lost anything more than what I would have initially. I have a Zoom meeting scheduled for next Friday with an attorney who specializes in my line of work and has experience with similar situations. Why am I pursuing a divorce? Because as painful as it is right now, I want to begin a new chapter in my life. I suspect that no intelligent woman would be interested in a long-term relationship with a separated man. I'm 64, and maybe there's still someone out there willing to share the next 10, 15 years with me. Did she secretly stash away any money? No. I saw the paychecks, deposits, W-2s, and I handled the tax payments on April 15. Back in July, I took care of transferring her $400,000 into her IRA when the company was on the brink of shutting down. There were no hidden funds. Her affair was all about physical and romantic thrills. She lied and deceived me, but our finances were never a battleground. I'm still part owner of her 50%, and I'm not letting go of my 25% share. In California, there's a chance she might legally get 50% of my pension due to our marriage, but that's still up in the air. She's tentatively agreed to 30%, though she might push for the full 50%, but that's as far as she can go. I'm standing firm at no less than 50%, with a potential 70% outcome. I'll have more clarity next Friday, after consulting with my attorney, who specializes in family law for folks in my profession. Everything else we own will be split evenly. Update. The pain is intense, but despite my anger, I'm in a better place than I was last month or the one before. I've stayed sober since January 1st and don't miss alcohol. Earlier, a bottle of Jameson, a six-pack, and 3 or 4 bottles of wine would barely last 4 days. I'm proud of this progress. I'm not rushing any decisions, but I see no barriers to a fair settlement, except for the pension. We divided our living trust assets fairly as planned. She retains her IRAs, and I keep mine. We balanced the $130,000 difference during the trust division. My attorney has sent the petition, and the 70-30 pension split is unchallenged. Her attorney will be served since she's still in France. Packing and emptying the house has been grueling. I'm planning to move to the Las Vegas area. She's supposed to return on March 16th, and I might be gone by then, just kidding. She hasn't apologized for the pain she caused, showing no remorse. In December and early January, I sought answers, but she ignored all my questions. Sometimes, I can't believe the nightmare I'm living. The affair. The lies for almost 6 years. It's inconceivable that she, of all people, would betray me like this. I'm deeply saddened and far from over it. Regarding the house and her business, after she confessed the affair on November 3rd, my first thought was to sell the house. Later, I changed my mind, wanting to hold on to it. But I realized moving on would be impossible while living in the home where we spent 23 years. At least they were happy years for me. So we decided to sell it. She told me, "Do whatever you think is best for you. We're debt-free and in our 60s. She's convinced herself that her affair was a beautiful love story, not a sordid betrayal, despite 6 years of lies. I can sense her belief, though I can't accept it. It's excruciating to look at old photos and remember all the places we've been. With my 25 years in the travel industry, we visited countless destinations, with so many more to explore. Over 40 years, I often told her if I stopped making her laugh, she should leave. I didn't realize the end had come. Am I over her? No, definitely not. Do I want her back? No, she's become a habitual liar, even over trivial matters. I suppose her 6-year affair honed her deceit. Last night, she walked into our 22-year shared home and barely noticed the missing frames, photos, books, plants, and sofas. Her detachment from these memories is almost eerie. Do these things mean anything to her? Does she remember our intimate moments on those sofas? The laughter shared with friends and family around that table? I doubt it. Or worse, she simply doesn't care. The petition states the business's value is yet to be determined, with each of us entitled to 50% of her share, currently worth nothing. She and her partner are counting on an SBA loan or grant to stay afloat until fall. For the first time, she admitted to feeling exhausted from work, struggling for customers, and dealing with her partner. I had a wonderful relationship with my mother-in-law. We played tennis, ran 10K races, sang, laughed, and debated politics. We always had a great time. Now, at almost 90, her mental health is rapidly declining. She can no longer read or watch TV for more than a few minutes, and her health is deteriorating. She doesn't know about our impending divorce and has lost her sense of time, thinking I was in France for Christmas, even though it's been 5 years since my last visit. My new life will begin in early May when I move out, leaving behind the trauma of the past 4 months. However, since Monday, she's been acting as if she did nothing wrong. I'm pretty sure she's telling people she found happiness and couldn't have prevented our situation. If roles were reversed and I were the cheating husband, I'd be seen as the lowest of the low. Update: she returned 2 weeks ago. The night before she left, we had one last drink in our home, and I asked her 4 questions. I stayed calm, kept my voice steady, and made it clear these questions weren't intrusive. Predictably, she denied everything. No, she didn't go on hikes to use her phone. No, she didn't disappear at Strand Hill to use her phone. No, the Martinique trip wasn't planned, but spontaneous. Yes, her sister insisted on her 2.5-month trip to France. I told her I believed her, but deep down I don't. Or rather, I'm not sure. I've learned she can lie without flinching, a revelation since D-Day. She used the excuse, "It just happened." But I called her out, telling her it was a pathetic excuse. She made it happen. She wanted it to happen. It was her decision to end things, and the divorce should be wrapped up soon. In 2 weeks, I'm moving to Las Vegas to a beautifully renovated home in a great neighborhood. But why do I feel so miserable? The divorce isn't final yet. In California, the process takes a minimum of 6 months, and we officially separated on February 25th. 2 weeks ago, I moved into my new small house. During my first golf outing, I met 2 friendly guys who invited me to play again. One is married to a French woman and likes chatting with me in French. He's about 90% fluent, funny, and a decent golfer. The warm weather is pleasant, though I know it won't last. I've had several interactions with her about our leased house in LA and other administrative matters, but nothing beyond that. I deeply miss the camaraderie we once had, sharing jokes and stories. It saddens me that this part of my life is gone forever. The divorce proceedings are dragging on. My lawyer sent the dissolution stipulation for review last week, and it looks straightforward. I still communicate with her, albeit sporadically, mostly about administrative and business matters. When we met in March, she refused to explain herself, so it's no surprise she's not doing so now. She has a new tactic for difficult questions. She just ignores them. If a text message bothers her, she sets it aside. She avoids confrontations, preferring the easy way out, which is also how she deals with her sister. This is quite unusual for a business person. The divorce should be finalized in the next 3 months. I'm still very sad, angry, and incredibly lonely. I can't fathom how she lied to me for over 6 years, deceiving me with loving messages while having affairs with multiple men. Her infidelity began 4 months before we were separated due to COVID, and she was already deep into the deception. Here's something almost amusing. We had a joint bank account for various reasons, agreeing to inform each other about unexpected or large expenses. This arrangement worked well, but her guilt prevented her from spending on her affair partner, knowing I would see it. Update: my soon-to-be ex-wife now mainly lives in France, taking care of her mother during the day and spending time with her affair partner in the evenings. She flew in yesterday to meet her business partner and visit our son. I mentioned in early February that I was looking at houses in Las Vegas, and she likely found out through our son that I had bought one. She expressed interest in seeing it, but you all convinced me it was a bad idea, so I canceled the SUV rental from Enterprise. She doesn't stay with me, but in the adjacent condo that belongs to her mother, where our son lives. Her mother returned to France when her health worsened. I'm not sure if she's still involved with her Algerian affair partner, but it's possible. She arrived last night as planned. Before her flight, she asked me to pick her up from the airport. I didn't want to, but I could sense from her voice that something was wrong. I probably should have declined, but I'm trying to keep things civil, so I went to pick her up at LAX. She looked terrible, and I wondered if something was wrong with her mother, but I didn't ask. Before we left the parking lot, she dropped a bombshell. Her Algerian affair partner had ended things. I didn't visibly react. I'm not sure why she told me. Maybe she needed someone to talk to, or maybe it was because she wasn't financially supporting him enough now that her business had failed. I didn't respond to her revelation. She then mentioned that her Dr. ex-boyfriend had invited her to go hiking in France next time. I know her well enough to see through her intentions. The whirlwind affair with the young Algerian was over, and now she seemed to be trying to make me jealous with the hiking proposal. She also asked if she could see my house in Vegas, but I lied and said it wasn't ready. I couldn't just tell her to go away, as that might jeopardize our agreements. As I mentioned before, I won't create any problems until the divorce is finalized. That should take about 6 months, the minimum duration in California. Why wait? Because if she becomes upset with me during this time, she could potentially claim an additional 20% of my pension. She's entitled to 50%, but she agreed to settle for 30% against her attorney's advice. That 30% represents around $1,500 per month for life, a significant amount for my budget. Both of us have legal representation, and our attorneys are handling the necessary procedures. The divorce petition has been prepared and is currently being processed.